This video is a patron request. If you'd like to make a video request of your own, you can do so by becoming a Tier 5 patron. The link to this can be found below. Greetings, denizens of the Empire. It's Jabari here. Throughout the past couple of years, we've occasionally discussed the various methods in which sub-Saharan Africans recorded their history, and today's presentation will be a new addition to that series. Perhaps the most striking contrast between the history of sub-Saharan Africa and the rest of the Old World is the relative lack of a written history. While this is also true for the whole of Australia, the whole of South America, the majority of North America, much of Africa, and even parts of Northern Europe and Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa specifically tends to be the one region where this fact is most prominently emphasized, especially when used as a means to discredit or scrutinize African people. However, recording history does not require a writing system, and while writing has proven to be among the most reliable methods of doing so, it is not the exclusive requirement. Today, we will talk about a unique system developed in the Great Lakes Kingdoms of East Africa. Writing systems have been historically used throughout most of Europe and Asia, as well as Mesoamerica, for thousands of years as a means of recording and documenting historic, scientific, and administrative data among various civilizations. The same is also true for most of North Africa and parts of West Africa and the East African coast. Additionally, some isolated instances of writing, proto-writing, or analogous systems have existed in various regions throughout Africa south of the Sahara, but never expanded into widespread or universal use, as was the case in most Eurasian or North African civilizations. Additionally, proper books, scrolls, or other means of storing large caches of the written word were virtually non-existent in much of sub-Saharan Africa, with the exception of the Islamic and Christian states like Mali and Ethiopia. However, despite the relative absence of a proper writing system, many African civilizations developed their own unique means of storing information and sending messages in a similar manner, and today we will discuss a very unique method of storing information developed by the people of the Bunyoro Kingdom in the Great Lakes region of Africa. Before we cover that though, I think it's important to mention a few analogous systems found throughout the continent. The Luba people of Central Africa created mnemonic devices called Lukasa memory boards that aided oral historians in recalling stories, events, medical data, territorial boundaries, and kinship, among many other important pieces of information. The Yoruba people of what are now in the countries of Nigeria and Benin created the system of Aroko, which consisted of a specific series of objects including seeds, shells, and sticks all tied into a string in a very specific order. The specific order that the objects were arranged as well as the length of the string itself all came together to form a detailed and concise message. I've discussed both of these topics in great detail before, and I will leave links to each of them at the end screen. Despite many diverse African societies developing several means of recording information through the use of symbols, perhaps the largest hindrance to their preservation and widespread adoption throughout the continent was the tendency of restricting their use to secret societies. In fact, all of the aforementioned systems, Aroko, Lukasa, and MCDB, were strictly enforced by secret religious societies or royalty. The system that we will discuss from Bunyoro also seems to follow this trend, and as a result, little is known about it in the present day, and interestingly, flowers were at the foundation of it. British anthropologist Jack Goody, however, claimed that this is unlikely. He cited human use of both flowers and writing systems as being absent in Africa and their prevalence in Europe and Asia as being a clear indicator that African culture is innately different and separate from that of other Old World cultures. He claimed that African cultures as a whole generally lacked any form of complex agriculture and lived very simple lives, absent of a culture of luxury. His bold claims about Africa are not only overgeneralizations, but numerous African civilizations clearly show that his assertions fall short on evidence. Throughout the interlacustrine kingdoms of Africa, flowers held a very important purpose for both botanical and ceremonial purposes. For example, the kingdom of Bunyoro in question was far from simple. It had ancient origins and immense complex hierarchical structure. His assessments of flowers was also false, as they were used throughout the kingdom for perfumes, decorations, and courtship. Scents derived from wildflowers were often used on clothing of brides to produce pleasant odors. Even folk tales of the kingdom placed heavy emphasis on offerings of flowers. The language of flowers is perhaps the most complex use of flowers throughout the kingdom of Bunyoro. Shane Doyle, a British professor of African history, recorded an account from a Bunyoro elder describing the flower language that took place in the late 19th century when King Kabalega allied with the Busongora against the Toro throne, forcing them into exile in the neighboring kingdom of Nkore. Afterwards, King Kabalega sent a secret message to Koboga, the queen mother of Nkore, but of Busongora blood. This message consisted of a complex arrangement of flowers which requested that the princes of Toro be assassinated. Busongora never wanted Toro to succeed, so thus, afterwards, the princes were assassinated and only one escaped, taking refuge in Buganda. The elder then went on to describe how a flower arrangement, each flower had a name and a meaning. That was how the elites communicated in the old days. Initially, Doyle disregarded the account as nothing more than exaggerations and distortions of the truth, a consequence of Bunyoro historians attempting to overly embellish the richness of the proud history that European colonialism had recently destroyed. However, after he recorded 6 other references to this mysterious flower language, and in addition to verifying the details of the stories as fact, he subsequently changed his opinion. Have you ever considered trying some traditional medicinal southern African herbs like kana? Or those from West Africa like akuama? Or if you're feeling even more adventurous, maybe even try some from Polynesia like kava, or my personal favorite from Southeast Asia. I've been using Happy Hippo Herbal's products for nearly 2 years now, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that they have literally made my life better. I cannot even begin to tell you how immensely they've helped with my levels of focus, relaxation, energy, and peace of mind. You can order a free sample pack if you want to see for yourself by simply following the link down below, and if you are happy with these wonderful traditional medicinal herbs, you can get 15% off all future purchases by using my personal discount code FN10. More credence to the existence of this flower language comes from the year 1906. British missionary Albert Lloyd prominently expressed his condemnation of the culture of the Bachwezi, or the ruling class of the kingdom of Bunyoro. Yet he observed the flower language in use in Bunyoro and said the following: all the flowers had secret meaning to the Bachwezi, and they would send messages to the big chiefs by the flowers, and this became a secret code and was used in Bunyoro until quite lately. In the year 1936, Nyabongo Akiki, a Bunyoro man himself from the Bapito ruling clan, even claimed to have written an academic paper with detailed information about the flower language, but unfortunately, it is not known where this paper is today. Considering the secrecy of the communication system, it is likely that it was located by elites and hidden or destroyed. Nearly 2 decades later, in the year 1952, a colonial official made a note about a book that he intended to write about ebito, a traditional method of communicating with flowers, leaves, grass, twigs, and stones. But once again, there is no evidence of this book's existence, and it likely never proceeded anywhere past the planning stage. It is interesting to note that this reference refers to the flower language by what is presumably the native name of the writing system, ebito. The earliest reference that possibly unintentionally documented the existence of the Bunyoro flower language dates back to the year 1863. British explorer John Hanning Speke was on a quest to discover the source of the Nile, and would later go on to be the first European to find it, the Great Lake Victoria. While awaiting permission to enter the capital of Bunyoro, King Kamurasi responded to this request by simply sending 2 loads of flowers neatly packed in long strips of rush pith. It is likely that Speke perceived this beautiful arrangement as a warm, welcoming gift from this unknown kingdom. It is very plausible, however, that this floral arrangement was likely an attempt from King Kamurasi to communicate with this mysterious white-skinned stranger. So, given all of these references to a flower language but no surviving examples, one might wonder, how did this system work exactly? Well, earlier, I compared it to the aforementioned system of Aroko used by the Yoruba people, far, far away in West Africa. Both systems rely on natural objects arranged in a specific order to objectify speech with symbols or visual cues. This ambiguity is part of what made these systems so successful as secret forms of communication. This technically classifies both Aroko and Ebito firmly into the pictographic category of writing. That's right, proper writing systems without the use of the pen or paper. However, while the Yoruba Aroko system effectively functions more like a system of puns and riddles, the Bunyoro Ebito system seems to have been a bit more complex. For example, just like the written word, the flowers used in Ebito can be used to mean different things depending on context, relation, or proximity to other flowers within the arrangement. For example, the species of flower may have one meaning, while a specific color can also have a different meaning. In Bunyoro culture, the color white denotes something generally good or associated with favorable conditions. Thus, an assortment containing many white flowers may have a generally positive message encoded. The number 9, Omwenda, is considered to be a sacred number. Thus, arrangements in sets of 9 can denote beauty or generosity. Women and men are associated with the numbers 3 and 4 respectively. These examples are but a few of many possible symbols that could have been incorporated into Ebito. The very nature of this system was sluggish and inefficient, therefore may have only been useful for very important messages and not as a means of preserving massive amounts of information for long periods of times. This, in addition to the innate secret nature of it, made it inevitably fail to ever spread far and wide to many people, as did other writing systems around the world. In fact, even traditional writing with ink and paper was a relatively secret skill for most of human history, as the general population was usually illiterate and paper very expensive. Therefore, typically only high-ranking officials in noble or priestly classes were ever permitted to learn to read and write. However, flower arrangements were a much more volatile and time-consuming method of writing messages, and consequently, they were only useful for relatively short and temporary means of sending messages. For most of its history, Bunyoro was a highly sophisticated and powerful empire with a formidable navy, and some of the most advanced medical and metallurgical practices in the world. The world's oldest open-hearth furnace ever made was uncovered in the region, capable of producing high-carbon steel and predated any Western version by nearly 2,000 years. Bunyoro surgeons indigenously invented the practice of caesarean sections, in which the mother and the child both survived the procedure prior to any other known civilizations, with advanced antimicrobial and botanical knowledge that prevented infection and cured disease. This same botanical knowledge may very well have been what contributed to the Ebito flower language, as complex documentation of numerous plant species would have been essential for both. Today, however, as a result of a steady decline from the 18th century onwards, Bunyoro is but a mere shadow of its former glory, being almost entirely composed of rural farmers, most of which live below the poverty line. Perhaps in the future, more attention is placed on the traditional knowledge and practices of this ancient kingdom, so this treasure trove of African innovation can be explored and truly appreciated. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and consider joining our community Discord server. For sources, check out my website, linked below. If you'd like to support future projects, you can do so there as well, or by clicking the join button below, or by becoming a patron. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching as usual, and always remember, we don't come from nothing.